Elieves.
And we were talking earlier, just a little earlier, about how the SaaS ecosystem, in India is exploding. And at last count, one estimate puts us at having about between 7 to 8,000 SaaS startups in this country. And, Raman was also talking about the fact that funding for SaaS companies in the US continues to grow significantly with large, very, very large amounts of money now being invested in the SaaS ecosystem. I think along with that, what's really definitely opening up is, and that's really where customer success as a domain and as a function is growing significantly in importance. I think already in the West as a function is grown, and it's a very key part of all SaaS and enterprise sales ecosystems. But in India as well, now we are starting to see customer success as a career starting to open up, and a lot of the larger SaaS companies here and other enterprise organizations who are selling B2B have actually built customer success teams. So it's a super interesting time, and no one better than Raman to talk about it. He spent a large part of his career working in different enterprise organizations focused on B2B selling, and today he heads customer success at SafeBreach, which is again a very, very interesting SaaS company. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Raman. All yours, Raman.
Hey, thank you, Anand. Can you guys hear me? Yep.
Yes.
Just one thing quickly is that as a structure, Raman is going to present for the next 25, 30 minutes. And after that, we'll open for Q&A. So I would request all of you to please put down your questions. You can put it in the chat box, and we'll definitely ensure that there's enough of time to answer your questions as well. Thanks, Raman. Sorry, all yours.
No, all good on. Thank you so much, and excited to partner with Elieves and talk about customer success and the trend that we're seeing over here. So a quick overview of my journey in customer success. I did my undergrad in India and then moved to California in late 2000. And over the last 20 odd years that I've been over here, I've been in customer success across several companies. And what I think I've observed is I've gotten the opportunity to be both in companies that were not in SaaS, that were still on-prem, were selling in the models that are now considered older, but then also looking at newer SaaS companies that have only sold subscription and in the cloud. So I've had the fortune to see both sides, and I'm hoping that I can share some of those experiences with you guys, and also seen a little bit of enterprise IT security and had a short journey in an edtech software company in the US. So kind of share all of this. And in this journey that I've had, I've led teams that together holistically are referred to as customer success, but in the earlier years, they were either account management or support or services, and then the CS and CSMs and so forth. So today I am at SafeBreach, and SafeBreach is a startup in the cybersecurity space. We were founded in 2014 in Tel Aviv, and then our founders, Guy and Itzig, moved to Sunnyvale in 2016 or so. And what we're really trying to do is build a simulation. The category we're in is called breach and attack simulation, which is really to validate security controls that the security teams apply across their infrastructure. And our platform provides a way to run simulations, run attacks, and validate the controls that you've been put in place. So an exciting time. We just announced our Series D, and we're in this hyper growth phase right now where we're growing as a company, adding new customers and adding people across the board, across all functions, including customer success. So let's just talk what happened, right? I mean, over the last 100 years, we've seen a lot of changes in the industry, right? They refer to the first phase as the age of manufacturing, then came the age of distribution, age of information. But the last 10, 15 years have been coined as the age of the customer. And the reason why I think we do that is because we know today customers have much more influence. They have a stronger power in the buying process. And that disruption has really happened over the last 10, 15 years. What we also saw in the early 2000s, the mid 2000s was a lot of the changes were happening on the technology as well. Distributed computing started moving to the cloud. Old business models that were there were slowly being disrupted by the emergence of subscription as a service. And I think one of the companies back in the day that was, I think, a pioneer, I think a lot of industry leaders feel like they might have kind of coined customer success in the early years, was really Salesforce. When Salesforce came out of their evolution, what they were competing were against the larger CRM software companies that were on-prem, that took a long time to deploy, were sticky after the deployment, but it was a long, you pay for the software upfront and then you pay a maintenance, and then that's how it was sold. But what Salesforce did was they said, let's build a different model in how we how we host the product, host the platform, but also how we charge and bill our customers. And what they did was they started this whole concept of a monthly or annual payment model, where you pay a piece of it every month or every year, rather than paying a huge upfront fee that covers licensing for 3-5 years and so forth. And that pivot was not just happening to, I think, software, but it was happening to other industries. But we started seeing that first in the software and the SaaS space. So I think that was one of the early companies that kind of started breaking the models that we had or we saw for the last 20, 30 years. Now, while all this was happening, Salesforce continued to grow at a rapid pace in the early years. And even today, if you look at their earnings year over year, quarter over quarter, they're just showing amazing growth every quarter. They did keep this customer at the center of everything, and they did everything that they could think was right. I mean, they just got everything correctly. But in spite of everything that they were doing, there were still customers that would leave the platform, and churn was taking place. And I think what happened was after a few iterations of seeing the churn, they definitely had to introspect and go back and see why were customers leaving in spite of us doing so many things correctly. Now, I think with the whole idea of churn, I think there was one aspect that did come out that was a positive for all of this, was customers wanted to see more value immediately after the purchase. It was not about spending a lot of time in the deployment and implementation phase, but they really wanted to get quick value, quick outcomes. And that was the kind of pushing force for Salesforce to go back and consider what to change. But it also started the evolution of, while sales is spending a lot of time in acquiring new customers, marketing was building the engine to help sales acquire new customers. There was a need for a function to really be responsible for the customers. And this group of people were only focused to say, what is the customer needing? What is the customer only looking for? And I think that's what I think was the biggest positive that came out of the churn that I think Salesforce started noticing, in spite of doing so many things correctly. And many of us believe that was really what Salesforce centered. It wasn't called customer success in that time. They probably were referred to as something else. I've heard customer for life was a department that they had, but the idea was really having a team that was focused on the success of the customer from day one, and not wait for a period of time before the customers start seeing value in the platform. And I think that was one of the biggest outcomes that today we are seeing in other SaaS companies, other businesses, where the investment to help companies retain their customers. And also now we're seeing how do we grow these customers has become a big part of the investment strategies that a company, a CEO, or founder is looking at when they are growing their companies. Also, there's been many analysis done, but one data point from KeyBank Capital Markets was, it does take much more to acquire a dollar than it does take to expand from the customer base that we have. So losing customers to churn and measuring churn and then identifying why the reasons were happening has become a critical part of really helping customers to make sure that they don't start bleeding their customer base that takes so much effort to acquire. And this really started the evolution of customer success. More and more companies started observing this in their practice as they launched SaaS offerings, or they started moving to SaaS offerings. They needed a function that's going to keep an eye on the churn and make sure that the churn numbers don't start creeping. Also, I think from the 2020 Emerging Jobs Report that was launched late in 2021, late 2020, we did notice that customer success specialist was actually was ranked at number 6. And I think that was a huge testament to the effort that many people have put in, many companies that have come out with software to help customer success. But it just showed that with the explosion of SaaS, enterprise software, the understanding of how important it is to retain your customers and reduce the churn, also show growth and impact net retention, it really created a huge demand for customer success in the industry. We are surely seeing that across the globe today. I think a lot of it started maybe in the US, potentially in the Bay Area, where a lot of the SaaS companies were started or coined in the early years. But today it's a global phenomenon. It's not just limited to the US. Every company that's global, companies that have presences in EMEA, APAC, North America, LATAM, have a function that starts small, customer success, because you do need potentially a couple of customers, but it's become a key part. And a lot of the skills that people do kind of need we've seen that are common across the CSM that get hired are really having good product skills, having strong communication, and kind of being consultative with your customers so that you can guide them to get to the outcomes that they want. We're seeing this across all the verticals, but definitely it's much more skewed towards the software and IT industry. Especially, I think, on the software, financial services, IT, marketing. I think those are the verticals where we're seeing a huge demand, where customer success investments are very high, and the demand and the number of jobs that we're seeing are also equally at that level. Now, this obviously is only going to grow. I think we're estimating the market to be close to $145 billion in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's only a matter of time before customer success becomes more prominent. One thing that I think we are still seeing is that customer success is still not well defined, like potentially sales or marketing or engineering has been, but that's understandable. It's not as mature as the sales function was, which has probably been around for 30, 40 years. Customer success has really been around for the last 10, 15, 20 years, and it's trying to get much more structured with a more defined charter across every company. Typically, this is what every company that has customers or that's looking to work or acquire customers looks at their life cycle. And a lot of the time is obviously spent by marketing and sales to acquire a customer. But once a customer is acquired, the first 30, 60, 90, 120 days is really to engage with the customers, onboard them, and really get to value quickly. And then beyond that, you want to try to help them to adopt the solution to get more out of the platform. And then eventually customers will either expand the footprint, you'll create advocates, and then renewal of the subscription becomes just a piece of paper that needs to get processed. Now, this is a continuous life cycle. It's not a point in time. This is a journey. Subscription, as you all know, is really it's an annual commitment that a customer gives to the vendor, and the vendor wants the customer to commit. And it's something you have to win their trust every year. So it's once you acquire a customer, you go through the motions every year, and you keep adding features, but you keep driving the value and keep helping them adopt new features, new capabilities, so that they're also getting value continuously with the subscription that they have. What we're really going to focus is on the parts after a customer is acquired. And I wanted to kind of break down, the activities that are involved in the role of customer success. And this is just not limited to what maybe potentially a CSM would do. There's different parts of the customer success organization where you have people from an implementation team, an onboarding team, the support organization, the CSMs, potentially technical account managers, renewal specialists, account managers. So several people all are part of the customer success. But if you start just looking at the activities, every customer that comes needs to be onboarded. You have to get aligned with the customer, have an internal handoff from the sales team to the CS teams, and get aligned with the customer and what are the outcomes they're trying to get to and by what time frame. And that's really kind of the first phase of every customer that we have, is get them onboarded, get them using the platform, get them to some quick wins, quick outcomes that they know are important for them. And the vendor is working closely with them to get to those outcomes. After that, we go into this phase of where we monitor how the product is being used internally by the vendor. But then with the customer, you want to work with them so that you can find more capabilities that they need to adopt to. And the idea is really to help them get value from the subscription and the commitment they've made with the vendor. From there, we find ways to engage with other parts of the business. So while you're potentially working with one business unit as the initial part of the rollout, the customer might have other plans to roll it out to other business units. And you need to find, the CSM needs to find ways to engage, not just with the business unit that is primarily starting off, but also build relationships and partnerships with other business units who are going to potentially become users and partners of the platform that they have acquired. Driving value is another key part of a customer success team and what the CSM does. I think everyone knows this, but no customer is buying a software to just click on the software, right? They're trying to get value. They're trying to get to an ROI. They're trying to really solve problems that they've had, and they acquired a solution for those reasons. So identifying what are those outcomes and helping the customers get to those outcomes and measuring the value so that you can define how long it's taking you to get to the value, and then continuously measuring that so that you can go find ways to optimize that within the company, but also provide that to the customers. And lastly is advocacy. I think creating fans and building advocates is something that is intangible, because the word of mouth we see that spreads on why one brand is better than the other, or what one experience has been better compared to the other, is really creating these advocates so that these advocates will eventually go talk about your solution, and they become your champions in the industry. So for a CS team, there's a lot of there's a lot of KPIs that could be measured across different parts of the department. But at a very high level, if you look at some of the leading indicators for all the activities that the CSMs do, or the CS team does in a company, I've kind of identified 5 over here, but the first one is really time to value. This has become more and more critical. We've seen this emerge much, much more in the last 5-8 years than it was in the first, but really understanding why customers, how do customers get value, and how long is it taking them to get value? The last thing you want to do is really sign up a customer for a year for an annual subscription, and then it took them 9 months to get to value. Now, some solutions do take that long, but I think every organization is trying to find ways to optimize that and reduce that, because I think if you can get to value in the first 60, 90 days, depending on solution to solution, you can say that the customers are getting to value really quick, and from then they're really going to extract more value. If you're getting value in 9-10 months, then potentially one of the executive sponsors could question, was this the right solution? Why did it take so long? Looking at health scores. So in the world of SaaS, as you all know, it's in the cloud. There's a lot of data insights that every vendor has from the cloud, from the product team. And there's a lot of ways to take some of that data and to apply both quantitative and qualitative measures to come up with a health score for your customers. And every industry, every company, every product has different and uniqueness to it, where it's not easy to just define, but there's a lot of inputs that go into creating a health score, and tuning it so that it's accurate and consistent. So having a health score and identifying which customers are at risk of either growth or retention or not using the product enough will kind of help you identify where to focus your efforts on. The third one is adoption. Going back to the product in the cloud and the telemetry that we get from products today, there's a lot of solutions that help with the telemetry, but identifying how to measure how much of the product is being used and how many features of the platform are being used has become a key part of understanding the product usage. And it really depends on your unit of measurement. So if you're selling seats or servers or some other unit over there, you want to identify, if I sold 100 seats, are 50 of them being used, 25 or 75 or all 100? But then in the platform, if you have 8, 10 capabilities, you also want to see how many of those 8, 10 high valued features are being used, apart from just number of seats being used. I think it's very well known that the higher the adoption rates of your product, it does correlate directly with the lower churn that the vendor has to experience. The next one is really outcomes. So as I said, customers are trying to get outcomes, and that's why they made the investment in your product and solution. So clearly trying to find out how to define an outcome and then measure that outcome. It potentially could be manual for the first year or so that the customer is working with customers, but then you want to try to operationalize it so that it can be scaled. But the outcomes is really what the customer wants. And if you can measure the outcomes that they're getting to, I think that's a huge success in also understanding the value customers are getting. And lastly, advocacy. You want to measure how many referrals, how many advocates, so that you can kind of see how that database is growing. And then you want to keep the database relevant. People leave. Sometimes the companies still are strong believers, but you also want to track and identify these folks. But when these folks leave, they want to maybe go back to a new place and bring back the solution that they love the most. So building advocacy, measuring it is really important. So these are all the activities, kind of the leading indicators that the CSM, the CS teams are responsible for. But how does all of this work translate into value for businesses? And the value for businesses are really measured by how fast is the company growing? What is the shareholder value? What are the multipliers if potentially there's an exit or there's an IPO event for a company? And the three areas that I think have become kind of the lagging indicators that most companies are now very closely monitoring is firstly gross retention. You want to understand and measure how many customers, when you started off, how many customers are still part of your product line, how many did not continue the service. And you want to measure both from a dollar, from a revenue perspective, but also from a logo perspective. But that story does not really complete the entire picture. The second big part of a customer success and the maturity of a customer success team is really to drive expansions from your current customer base that you have. And this is in partnership with the sales team, but really to look at your customer base and say, if I started with 10 customers at a total of say $100, how many of them reduced their footprint and how many of them expanded their footprint from a dollar perspective? So if you have 100, if you started off with 10 customers at $100 and you end up with 9 customers at $110, you are seeing a $10 growth from your customer base that you started off at the beginning of the year. And that's really measuring your net dollar retention. And it's becoming a big metric that most investors, most companies are now measuring very closely against. I think of what I've heard, what I've seen some people evangelize and talk, and some experts say that net dollar retention right now is becoming one of the, it's if not the top metric, it's like on the top 2 where company valuations are being closely measured by a net dollar retention. So the ability to expand your customer base is becoming a key part, and customer success plays a big part of that. In some organizations, depending on the product, they own the expansion and they drive all expansions. But in some companies, they partner very closely with the sales team, with the account management team to really drive that expansion for their existing customers. And lastly, really is the experience, right? How your experience is measured by NPS. NPS is probably the biggest, or if it's one of the most popular measures of how satisfied are the customers with the product, the solutions, the entire ecosystem. It's one question that gets asked: would you recommend, refer, your product to a friend or colleague? And depending on the rating, the percentage of promoters subtracted by the percentage of detractors really determines the score. And measuring that score and making sure it's moving the right direction has become a key part to understand how companies and how customers are looking at the vendors that they work with. So kind of putting some of these things together, right? If you look at all the activities, you definitely want to create a framework or build an ecosystem where you know how your customer is moving along the journey. So all the activities that happen where the sales and marketing teams are working to close a customer is the first phase. And in many companies now, what we're seeing is customer success is partnering with sales even before a customer comes into the ecosystem. So they're working in the last few stages where they're talking to the prospect and helping them understand what the journey is going to look like once you become a customer, understanding the goals and outcomes you're trying to get to. Then you go into the adopting stage where you're onboarding a customer, improving the time to value, but also increasing the adoption and footprint of the product that the customer required, purchased, spending a lot of time with renewals and understanding the renewal process. When the companies are larger, there's a lot of transactions, a lot of changes that take place. So there's a lot of activities involved. In smaller organizations, it might not be that big. However, if you do everything right in the first 6-9 months or the first leg of the journey of a customer, the renewal really becomes a piece of paper that needs to be processed across the procurement teams and the partners and so forth. Identifying expansion opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, if you just look at where the importance of net dollar retention is in the industry, expansion has become a big part of how we're going to see this, or how we're going to grow the company and how we're going to look at customers and help them be successful. And the alignment with sales, I think, is very important over here. And customer success, I think, is now playing a key role, either in companies where they own the number or they partner with sales and they're providing that cover and partnership to the sales teams. And lastly, advocacy. I think this is a big measure as well, where every customer success team is closely monitoring and measuring and identifying who are the champions in your customer base, who are the ones who are willing to get on a stage and talk about your brand and your platform and kind of build a word of mouth across other peers in the industry that they talk to. Or if they move to other places, they're going to also think of you when they go to another place. Also, I think, as we know, the market in India is emerging like crazy. I think there are stats that show that in the last 2-3 years, there have been many, many more unicorns now out of India. While some of these names, I think, were one of the earlier ones like Zoho and iCertis, but in the last, with the last round of funding from many of the companies like ChargeBee and Innovator, and IPOs from Freshworks, you probably see the market and the ecosystem in India is just on a very high rise. There are, I think, definitely more than 1,000. The number could be much, much more higher. I think there's startups coming out of stealth mode almost every day, every week out of India. The funding out of investors, not just in India, but for investors out of US, I think, are also tapping into markets in India. So it's a huge, huge opportunity for the India SaaS ecosystem. And I think people working over there and customers who are going to buy these subscriptions, be part of the subscriptions, and I think customer success is going to be a critical function for the retention of these customers and also growth of these customers for all these vendors that are coming out of India as well. I think this is showing in the job market as well. So whether you go to LinkedIn, Naukri.com or Shine.com, the number of opportunities that just have customer success in them is, exponentially growing, right? 25,000 jobs in Naukri.com and 40,000 in Shine.com. I think it's just a testament of there is definitely a huge demand. And if what we've seen in the markets in the US, there's going to be a huge gap where the demand is going to be high and there's not going to be enough talent. And the beauty about customer success is it has attracted people from all flavors of the industry, right? We've seen people going from sales and account management into customer success. We've seen product experts go into more product specific roles under customer success. We've seen retention, renewal management be part of customer success. So we've seen different people, different folks raise their hand and say, you know what, I think this function is where I find my calling and I'd rather be in customer success and make an impact on the customer journey, the customer experience. And now with all the net retention, they can make an impact on the top line as well. So huge, huge growth over here in the ecosystem in India, globally, across other parts of the world as well. So lastly, just a couple of takeaways, right? I think what I wanted to kind of share earlier as well was, as much as customer success is a department, and the department has sometimes layers, hierarchies, defined functions, it is also a mindset that companies have now when they are building their companies. So many founders, many CEOs, many executive teams are saying that customer success, being obsessed by customers, we have at our company customers obsession as one of our key values. It is really at the heart of the company. And it's not just about looking at KPIs and metrics, it's also about believing in it and making decisions that are customer centered, and also keeping that always in mind as you make decisions. The other area is you want to have customers get more value from your products. And you want to spend time with your customers to identify what are the key outcomes they're trying to get to, and how can we that are providing the platform can use the platform to get to those outcomes. And once they get to these outcomes, we all know that the multipliers and the value the shareholders are going to see from the companies are going to be exponentially much, much higher. We've seen this trend pick up quite a bit, that customer success activities now are influencing net dollar retention. And if net dollar retention is one of the top metrics that investors and board members are looking at the growth and the valuation of a company, you definitely see the importance customer success is going to have in the company, and the impact we're going to make with customers will drive net dollar retention when they expand the footprint and buy more from the platform. And lastly, I think the demand is there. Demand is growing. I don't think there's going to be a shortage of opportunities, but I think it's important to understand also which part of customer success is going to be your calling, which part of customer success excites you the most, and how you can make an impact to customers and drive business valuations. So I think it's an exciting time to be in customer success, both for people trying to get into the space, for people already in the space, people who've grown their careers in customer success, but also I think customers now seeing the impact a CSM can make. In my experience working across several companies, sometimes the feedback you get from customers when they see the impact a CSM makes, or some team member from customer success makes, is quite humbling. And you go back and feel really good that some things are working, where investment in customer success is only going to be helping customers and business valuations. I think that covers most of the areas I wanted to share. I think we wanted to open up to questions in a little bit, but Anand, back to you.
Yeah, if you could just move to the next slide, sorry. So one of the things that we are planning to do at Elieves, we are a new edtech platform, and we partnered with Raman to actually build a very bespoke course focused on B2B customer success. So this is a specialization that will be taught only by domain experts. So Raman himself will be teaching on this course. And we have another faculty, Rahul Gandhi, who's the head of customer success at Logmein, which is a Israel-based SaaS company, and he's based out of India. So any of you who are looking to really upskill and look at pursuing customer success as a potential opportunity, there's this course which is coming up. It's slated for end of Feb, early March, but you can check out on our website at www.elieves.net for more details. Right? So if anybody's looking to build a career, here's an opportunity for you, and with some very clear learning outcomes. I think, as you've seen with Raman being a practitioner, our focus on all our courses is to bring in people who are working in these domains, because that's the only way another working professional can truly upskill themselves in a meaningful way. So if you look at this course, it's really designed from a very real world and application orientation perspective, and more details will be coming up on the platform soon. But I know it's late, guys, so I'm going to take questions, and there are already some questions on chat. So let me start off with the first one, which had come in from Navya. So I think you answered this partly, Raman. So Navya asks, is there any prior experience required to move to a customer success manager role? I mean, are there any preferences?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think what I've seen is, so for example, if you're looking to move into an HR software company, if you come from the HR background, you have a good understanding of the product, and that I think does potentially fulfill one of the requirement where someone from an HR software or SaaS platform might want to talk to HR professionals who are looking to get there, or you take an edtech platform, teachers and practitioners who want to move into edtech, or if you take cybersecurity, if you've been a security engineer in a security company and you're looking to be moving into a more customer-facing role, you would apply for a function in customer success in a cybersecurity company. So some of that I think is a good way to potentially look at opportunities in customer success if you're not from already a tech support role or a services role or a CSM today.
Awesome, thanks. Rael had a question. It's a little long one. So Rael talks about the fact that in India, Salesforce actually expanded by partnering with third-party developers. And in his experience, he had, for one of the startups he was working for, he had chosen Salesforce. He paid an annual fee upfront, but unfortunately, their partners could not get the job done, and they lost about 2 quarters of time. So his question was, how do you take a SaaS platform globally, but without losing customers at the hands of third parties you partner with? How do you avoid such incidences?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think what I've seen happen is partner success, and this term got coined, I think, also 5-8 years ago. Is becoming more and more prominent. And I don't think, I will be honest, I don't think every company is investing in partner success, but it is becoming a trend. I think Salesforce, I think Cisco even has a whole community that they've created that's open to everyone, that talks about how their partners can, look at customer success principles and guidelines and kind of tap into that network of building a customer success function. But the buck does stop with the company at the end of the day, right? Whether it's Salesforce or Cisco or SafeBreach, if we are working with a partner, it is on SafeBreach to ensure our customers are getting value. So we as a company have to collaborate with our partners, whether it's having a partner success member dedicated to work with the partners, or evangelizing with the partners, or helping the partners build that function. I think the partners will be invested more and more, because if the customer does not stay with Salesforce or with the partner, both of them kind of lose the customer, and I don't think either of them would want that. But I think it's still an evolving part where partner success investments are growing. I don't think they've been fully matured across the entire ecosystem of all SaaS companies.
So Rael, did that answer your question? You can unmute if you have a follow-up. Okay, great, awesome. We have another question again from Navya. How do you move customers from adopting a proof of concept or POV to actual deployment of solution?
Yeah, so the POV, the proof of concept, in mostly B2B, right, is going to be your sales motions, right? That's where your pre-sales, your sales engineers, your salespeople are working with the prospect to help them get value, help them validate that the platform and the product can do what they're really trying to solve. And a lot of that effort is spent by that organization. I think the CS teams get involved when the prospect is maybe at the finish line or almost at the finish line, at the last mile, where they kind of want to help them understand what it might look like. They're maybe at the stage of getting the paperwork now. But a lot of that motion is really done. What happens in customer success is, even though they bought the solution, that doesn't mean that the team that's implementing it is seeing every part of the platform. So sometimes you have to start from the beginning, and you have to showcase the entire platform and show them where the value is the most. There's many cases where I think you all might have seen that the executive or the leaders have bought in a solution and then handed it off to the teams, and the teams have seen it for the first time. So there is some value discovery that happens in the first 30 days. That's why the alignment from sales to CS is important, to understand who was part of the POV, who were there in the decision-making process. And when you start your onboarding, you do the kickoff calls, you kind of share, this is what we understand is why you bought the platform, what you're trying to do. Is this aligned with what you're trying to do in the next 3 months? And focus your time in the first 30 days to get to that alignment with the customer, and then execute on the deliverables that they want to get out of the platform, and then kind of move them into this. And then they stay in the onboarding, and when they go into production or go through some use cases that are live and they're getting value, you move them into the next stage of where they're adopting the platform even further.
Awesome, great. Vignesh had a question, and so his question was about really low MRR customers. So his question was, how do you create value for low monthly recurring revenue customers in the first 90 days through a light touch model? because it's going to be very difficult to map, CSMs to every single customer.
Yeah.
So what would be
Yeah.
your approach?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think you said it correctly, right? What I did not cover, and we'll definitely cover that in the course, was really around segmentation, right? So not every customer can be treated the same. I think there's customers who pay much more. Some companies just offer only products that have low MRR. So the whole strategy of providing engagement through a scale or through growth, tech touch, I think, or low touch or digital touch, I think those are ways on how you have to operationalize it. But it is a harder challenge, right? It's harder where the scale, I think, presents bigger challenges where it's many customers who have to get to value quickly. But then you have to lean on digital and self-service and potentially collaborate with your product teams to really find ways on how customers can get to product value quicker from the product and platform itself. Not all of them will be led by humans, but building an ecosystem where you can find ways to get those product insights to clearly identify which customers are stuck because they're not even logging in, or which customers have logged in but they've not done an export of the tool to really take the data from the export and feed it to the next ecosystem. So identifying what those key areas would be, but I have to assume that you're getting some telemetry, some data sets, and for products where you can't, then you have to find ways in the engagement and interaction through either your support team, your surveys, your questions that you're coming to see what type of areas are they trying to cover. But it is definitely a harder challenge to overcome than when you have higher touch customers where you have people swarming them and completely providing white glove treatment.
Great. Thanks. Shwetanj has a question, which is, can a person from sales, and I think you answered this partially, can a person from sales switch to customer success? And if so, what are the skills that a customer success person needs to have, which are, let's say, over and above a sales professional?
Yeah, so I think what I've experienced is, I think sales, sales is obviously a big part of a company's growth, and they're very critical. But sales, I think, sometimes have these two mindsets of people, right? Are you the hunter or the farmer? The salespeople either are acquiring net new logos and they have this hunter mindset where they just love going and acquiring new customers and building and going in a green field and just doing that. And then there's some salespeople who are great at nurturing and farming your customers so that they will grow. Now, generally, if your ARR is very high or your ASP is very high, potentially every salesperson has to do both, because a customer doesn't stop growing just because of the first acquisition. But I think what you'll notice in CSMs is they definitely lean more on the farming side, or traditionally they've been on the farming side, more about helping the customer across their entire journey, their entire life cycle, not just acquiring them and trying to move on. But you will also notice that the tendency from the past has been that they're more on the farmer mindset, where they're more nurturing customers and helping them grow and get value. But we are seeing, with the growth of the importance of net dollar retention, can CSMs find opportunities to expand? But again, it's expansion within your customer base. It's not expansion with, to acquire net new customers. But sometimes acquiring or expanding a customer into a new business unit is like, going hunting for it. So potentially sometimes CSMs or salespeople who want to move to CS, if they have the ability to do both, it kind of does provide an advantage. But sometimes CSMs are have just been suited better to nurture customers and grow them, and also be vocal and strong and be vocal and loud about customer pain internally with products, with engineering, and escalating it so that customers are not, missing the value that they wanted out of the platform.
Awesome, great, thanks. If anybody has a question, you can put it in the chat box, or someone raised their hand. I'm sorry. Yes, Karthik, you can unmute and ask.
Hi, Raman. So I had this question specifically from the perspective of the handover from sales to customer success. Okay, and I've seen, and again, in my own experience, I found that that's probably the part where a lot of expectation mismatches tend to crop up. Okay, especially at the state where sales has promised certain aspects, and at the time of onboarding where customer success chips in, there is always misalignment in terms of what was agreed upon and what customer success actually tells them is what's possible or what's available. So in your experience, in terms of organizations and the way how they structure the entire handoff between sales and customer success, what do you think are some of the best practices that get followed? How do they ensure that there is alignment between what's been agreed upon versus and what's finally, how does the entire handoff take over, and how does customer success chip? Yeah.
No, it's a good question, Karthik, and I shouldn't be saying it's not a work in progress, right? I don't think every company is at a point where they can say our alignment with sales and CS is so good that we don't even talk about it. I think every company is trying to get better. I think there's a conscious effort to improve, and I think it starts at the leadership, right? So like in my case, my peer who's the head of sales and I are fully aligned, where it's really important to have this alignment so that a customer doesn't really see a friction. And it's not about whether CS and sales are in the same organization or reporting to the same manager, and that's when it works. But it is about, starting the discussions with your peers in sales and telling them what was captured, what was the outcomes, what are they trying to do, where are the notes. And it does take some effort. It does take some creating noise within companies, within your teams, within your peers. But not getting that is definitely a big detriment. And companies where they're having CSMs join pre-sales calls in the last stages is, one way that I think is one way that shows that there's good alignment. I've seen some companies where there's like a shared document, or they've used a tool where all the notes captured in pre-sales are really the same set of tools and notes that are used by CSM. So it's the same document or the same tools that get used from pre-sales to post-sales. And it's not just pre-sales putting in notes and then post-sales, starting it with a whole new system. But I think you're right. I mean, it is definitely a collaborative effort, and it's not where it should be. But that handoff is extremely important, because many customers, I've seen this in my journey, you probably have experienced it, is you get on a customer call and they say, why are you asking me these questions? I just spoke about it in length for the last 30 days with my pre-sales or my sales team. And that's where I think you start off with a bad taste, and you want to avoid those. Doing an internal handoff is one way to circumvent it, but the internal handoffs are for 30 minutes, an hour. It doesn't really cover the depth of everything. So I think trying to capture this in a tool, a document, even if it's a document that can be used by the CS team, I think will go a long way in that experience.
Any examples of some KPIs or shared KPIs that sales and customer success, in your experience, that both of them have some shared KPIs, which probably helps ensure that both of them are also gold on certain aspects, where sales is probably also gold on certain aspects from a CS standpoint, and CS also has some aspects, because might be if it's retention in some way, CS is actually helping sales in a way to grow the pie of the customer, and vice versa as well. Anything on your in from that standpoint, do you think that exists?
Yeah, so I mean, I think from a if you take from a business outcome, it's really the dollar retention, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if the customers do churn, you want to go identify why they churn, and you can go back and say, well, the first 3 months were a disaster. We spent a month just to get a customer on a call, then a month to understand why they bought it, what they're trying to do, and a month to even get started again. So I think that's on the revenue side. Internally, I would say the CS team is held accountable for how long did it take to onboard a customer, right? How long did it take for a customer to get value? And I think that should be a joint key metric, where if the sales people who are working with the customer can help reduce the time it takes to onboard, because they worked with the customer for the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, depending on your sales cycle. They know who's the right person to engage with. They know they can introduce CS and get us started. So I would say if there's one metric I would pick, for the first 90 days is really the time to onboard, time to value, and have sales, or, at least the SEs be part of that, where they have this joint ownership. I know some companies have even told the salespeople that your commission will only be paid out after, 90 days or 6 months, or maybe you have a retention goal as well for the first year of your SaaS customers, not for every year, but for the first year. So they want to be involved in the first year so that they have their commissions in the first year retention as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Rahil, I'll just come to you. There's a question from Samrat Ghosh which says, this is an interesting one. Would you consider CS as a cost center or a revenue center?
Yeah. This is the ongoing debate, right? I think we are seeing it evolve from just being a cost center. I think it started off as a cost center because there was no good way of defining it and it was getting hard. But I think now, as the charter is getting more defined, what we're seeing is parts of CS go into cost, part of CS goes into revenue. So for example, your support team, if your support team is under CS, that does go under costs. There's no debate on that part. But your CSMs, if they are driving revenue, they're driving expansion, they're driving retention, it does go under cost of revenue. Now, this is not a formula that I think everyone has adopted, but we're seeing a shift towards that model where CFOs and financial and investors are saying, well, some of it should be moved over there. And especially if the CSMs are on a commission or on a plan that drives retention. So we're seeing that shift happen, but I don't think it's fully solidified like sales and marketing as of today.
Awesome. We'll take a last question from Rahil. If you could unmute and ask your question.
Yeah. Hi, Raman. So I'm building this edtech on outcome-based learning, which is obviously, once if they learn through us, they also get placed in jobs. Now, there is no upfront fee, and we only charge the tuition fee after they get placed. So that's the concept of outcome-based learning. This also eliminates the fact that we have to hard sell or to have a salespeople in our teams. I want to understand, like right now on day one, what we have done since we launched our MVP. We had our customer success teams, and these are the people who are actually helping them in graduating in all the learning phase and journey. I want to understand how effectively I can do that, and what are the phases I would have to, to create those checkpoints in my process, so that their learning journey and their hiring and placement journey all get sorted.
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario. I mean, just off the bat, if I had to think of it, right? I mean, if you have your, if they're your prospects, right, or they're your customers, and you're trying to get them to the outcome, which is really the placement.
Yeah.
I mean,
these are young job seekers in customer service and inside sales. Those are the sort of roles which we are getting them hired in.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I don't think I'll do the right justification to the question without really talking to you more in depth. So to be honest, I think the best thing for us is maybe if you don't mind, if we can spend like 30 minutes offline and we can talk further, and then I can share my perspective with you. I think that'll probably be a better perspective than me trying to give you a quick overview without understanding more.